Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, some of this is going to be just touch briefly onto what Yara has said already. We're going to look at the workbook, um, an overview of the request for reimbursement. We're going to touch on the personnel, the travel, the training, operating equipment, contractual stuff, and other categories. And those are all the categories that are going to be on your workbook. And before I get going, if I can just emphasize, stress a couple things. On your submission, when you submit your RFR, if on the subject line you put your grant number is going to be your reference number. Just a second, which is at the top upper right hand corner on your. It's going to be on your RFR tab. Now we have the workbook instructions. Is going to be the first tab in your workbook. Please review those. It's very important. We ask you to look at those. They'll explain a lot. The RFR tab is completely locked, and it's going to populate automatically as you enter data into the summary tab. If you need to make any changes, again, I'm going to stress, please contact your grants or project analyst. Okay, so your reference number is going to be agency reference number, or the grant number is going to be here. Everything here is going to be, the only thing you'll be able to change here is the original or revised and the sign and date at the bottom of the form. Now your calculation page is this section where the personnel, the first and last name is going to be locked, and the grant percentage will be locked. What you're going to do is you're going to enter the total hours, you're going to enter the total grant hours employee work based upon the activity-based timesheet. That's going to automatically calculate the grant percentage. And then you just enter the gross wage, check date, health insurance, monthly rates on those. And then it'll calculate towards the end, and it'll pre-populate this page, the RFR tab. Okay, so to review, there's two tabs, the RFR and the summary. The RFR tab is locked for editing, except for the original or revised boxes. The summary and formula and the transaction log are locked for editing. There again, we're going to stress any changes need to be made, contact your GPA. Do not change anything. That's Yara stressed it out. We're going to stress it again. We can't stress it. People ask us all the time, please unlock the workbook. We cannot do that. And nothing will be processed if that signature date is missing. And there again, please make sure you have the signature and the date. You have the workbook filled out completely and everything in order. We give 30 days to respond to this. If you send the RFR in and we're able to get onto it the same day you submit it, and everything flow is in order and there are no questions, no requests for additional documentation or clarification, and at each step along the way, it gets to the controller's office within 8 working days. That's the quickest it can get there. So as you can see, if we have questions or any clarification on anything, missing documentation, that delays the whole process. Okay, the personnel changes. The name and the job title come off of your budget narrative. So that is entered by your grants analyst from the budget narrative. So if you need to change that, get hold of them. If you need to add an employee, you probably, like a position to the grant, you're going to have to do a budget modification to have that added. That'll have to go through the grant analyst. We touched upon the grant hours, enter the total hours. It's very important, total hours and total hours worked on the grant from the activity-based timesheet. Now, the activity-based timesheet is going to have the hours on that's going to have to match the pay stub. If there's going to be a problem with that, get hold of us on an individual basis and we'll talk to you about that. And you enter the gross wage under the gross wage section here, and that will automatically populate. Okay, your employee paid items are what we call the fringe, your health insurance, your dental, vision, Medicare, Social Security, retirement, other unemployment, workers' comp, disability, any other fringe that you may pick up. Now, the fringe that you enter is going to be only the employee paid. We have organizations that do include the employees portion. We will deduct that if we see it, or we will ask if we see it more than once, we will ask you to correct it, then that's going to be late payment again. So you enter the monthly amount here, or the Medicare and Social Security will come right off the pay stub, what you have there, and that'll populate automatically. Travel training, there is a template we have for this. So this may be a little different than what the slide says here. And on the template, it's going to have a description of the expense, and it's going to have the pay of the vendor, the total cost. It's going to have all your items like the airline costs, the mileage costs, the meals, the hotels. So you get that form that will be available here shortly. It will come from your grants analyst. And what you do is you fill one form out per employee per trip, and then on the description of expense, you can just enter that employee in one form per line. That way you don't have to break down, the several items into one trip. So you just submit the form with all the data, and if we have any questions, we will get back to you and ask for backup documentation. So that should expedite that as far as processing. The operating expense, there again, it's pretty much the same information, description of the expense, pay vendor, the total cost, check number, check date. Again, the cost allocation, which applies to all the categories, has to equal 100%. If you have more than 4, you can itemize it on a separate piece of paper. Equipment, same thing. Now, all this stuff has to come right off of what's on your budget narrative. There again, if it's not on your budget narrative, you're not going to get reimbursed. If you need to add something, there again, get hold of the grants analyst. Your match documentation, all the backup is the same as is required in all the other categories. So it's essential, just as like it needs to be broken down personnel, or whether it's just individual operating expenses, and all the expenses have to be within the month you're seeking reimbursement for. Good. In summary, request reimbursement is submitted on a reimbursement basis only. Okay, that's reimbursement. The only exception to that would be on the travel. Travel is only reimbursed after travel has occurred. If you're reimbursing somebody for personal use of the car, and they obviously that could be after the paid. But if you buy an airplane ticket 6 months in advance, you're not going to get paid until after that conference is attended or that travel occurs. RFRs are due no later than the 15th of the month following an expenditure. All documentation must be provided according to your agency's risk determination. So check the risk determination. That'll tell you what kind of backup you need to supply to us. If we need additional information, if you're like in a low risk category, we may on occasion ask you to clarify something or to send a piece of documentation and support it. If the employee item is not on the workbook or budget narrative, it won't be reimbursed. GMU will request clarification where additional information is needed. We give you 5 days. We will request things. A lot of times we'll do it by phone, or we'll send you an email if I can't get hold of you on the phone. If we don't get a response within 5 days, working days that is, we will process it less the item in question. And if you want to be reimbursed for that, it's something you can pursue on an amended reimbursement. Any requests for changes must be emailed to your GPA. New workbook will be provided with updated information. And like we already touched upon, our goal is to process all RFRs within 30 days after receipt. So please try and make it as everything you can the first time. We realize it's not going to be happening every time, but do the best you can. think with that, we go to any questions.
Okay, if you can please unmute yourself if you have any questions so that we can respond to your questions, that would be nice. Or you can always, if you can't hear us or we can't hear you, the chat box is always a good way to communicate with us too. Does anybody have any questions? Can you guys hear us?
I have a question. Sorry,
Thank you,
this
Denise.
is Denise from SAFI. And I may not have heard it earlier. It was a little hard to hear, but how do we determine our risk designation?
That's a good question. Denise, your agency is a new agency. It's the first time that you guys are receiving funding from our GMU. So you will automatically be high risk. And again, I think I touched based on that at the beginning. It has nothing to do with the work you do or what we think of you or that we don't trust the agencies. It has everything to do with what we are dictated by the state and the Fed. Every new agency has to be high risk and we have to monitor until we can get comfortable and train you. And then we can say, hey, you know, it's been 6 months, we see no issue, this can be changed, or next year, you know, but just know that for you, it will be a high risk.
I got it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, it seems like we either explained it very well, and nobody has questions, or not at all, that you don't know what we were talking about, so you have no questions. Okay, so if nobody has any more questions, we had 23 attendees, which is amazing. If you think of anything, please call or email. Email's better. I also want to just clear something that everybody should know, and I forgot to mention it at the beginning. GMU is going to start using your participation, attendance, you know, how you meet the goal, you meet the rules for grants, for the grants that you're receiving to determine funding for future years. So State Fiscal 21, the way, you know, if you attend the webinars are required. This was a required webinar. There's going to be more webinars specific to each grant. So CTF, CBCAP is going to have their own training because there's requirements. There are quarterly reports that I need to explain to all of you. So those are required. If we see that your agency is lacking participation, then that's going to be a bad thing for you when you request funding in the future years. Also, if your RFRs are not submitted on time with no justification, if your quarterly reports are not submitted on time with no justification. So please keep in mind that we are going to be tracking attendance, we are going to be tracking participation. If anytime I send out something that is going to be required and I'll let you know ahead of time, and you cannot attend or you have a justification to not attend, let me know so I can notate that on your file. We are trying our best to provide you with the information that's necessary to help your program be successful. We are being required by state and the federal government to provide you with training and provide you with technical assistance. Therefore, that's why some of the requirements are coming down. Anytime in the process in the year that you have a question, don't hesitate. There's only 3 of us in the office, so it will be easy for us to reach out. That's the purpose of the separation of units. Okay. Any more questions? There's no comments in the chat box. So thank you, everyone. You guys have a great day, and feel free to reach out. Okay. Bye.